My name is John Poitevent. I'm the director of Great Catholic Parishes. And our panelists today are some of my favorite people. I've had the privilege of working with most of them. The first is going to be Julianne Stanz and Stephen Serafin. They are not just national leaders, but they also serve in their local parishes. And Julianne has worked in diocesan ministry as well as Stephen, and they've both served in parishes on staff. So they have a real comprehensive view of this. Patty Rodriguez will join us in the second half. She's the director of lifelong faith formation at the Archdiocese of Newark. And then after that, Betsy and Angela, who are parish catechetical leaders at St. Jerome Catholic Church in Waco, Texas, right down the highway from me. So let's get going. Julianne and Stephen, come on and join me here. And thank you, folks. You are going straight from this webinar to consult the USCCB. So thank you for giving me the lead here. We get it first before you go talk to them. But I'm just so glad that you're with us, and I'm glad that you're with them and that they want to hear what you have to say on this. So just getting into this, let's kind of rewind a little bit and just go back to how we started. Tell us, when we say evangelizing catechesis, what do we mean by this? Because I know terms get thrown a lot, and people mean different things when they say them. What does the leadership of the church mean when they give this language to us?
That is a great question. And for those that are here today, welcome. I was actually in the room when this definition was being worked on by the bishop. So to hear them talk about this definition was very interesting. We will make sure that this is in the chat part for you, but I would say it much more simply that the style of evangelizing catechesis is differentiated from an older style of catechesis, maybe that prioritized more of an instructional and informational type of methodology. So it was very directional. It was teacher to student. It was very classroom-based, book-based, instead of more discipleship-based. And so the reference point I often use is the catechist is not the sage on the stage, but the guide on the side, and that it ushers in a style of accompaniment. It's also readiness-based. So I think about hobbies that your children might have, like playing music or maybe horse riding. Children aren't all put in one class for those kinds of hobbies because they have different abilities. The same is true of a style of evangelizing catechesis. Good catechists notice the developmental readiness of the child and the context of the home. And so the style of catechesis really speaks to that. Stephen, I know you have other thoughts on this too, because it's a very lengthy definition too.
It is. Yeah, I just threw it in the chat just to give us a brief overview of what we talked about last time as well. What I find is that it's also this progressive approach where we look at it as a lifelong model, rather than just these periods of time where we're just trying to form and pack filled with information the people that we're serving. So it begins with really getting to know who they are, giving them an introduction to the kerygma. There's this beautiful passage in the New Directory that really talks about embodying the kerygma, right? And so these first catechists that they're interacting with and learning from, we are becoming witnesses of Jesus to them in these first encounters, this beginning process, meeting them where they are, meeting them on the road. And then we begin an accompaniment journey, as Julianne said, right? We're walking alongside them, meeting them where they are, trying to figure out where God is at work in their life right now, and then leading them into a deeper formation, but always revisiting the kerygma. So what I love about this new approach is it's always taking it from the lens of what is this good news that we're sharing based on whatever topic that you're sharing. So whatever stages that they're in, right? The kerygma isn't just part of the pre-catechumenate anymore. It's part of this ongoing journey. So as you learn about the sacraments, how does that connect back to the good news? As you learn deeper and unpack the creed, how does each parts of those work connecting them? It's also filled with much more, I feel like, behaviors and the rituals and the prayer practices that we have is how do we actually living it out and implementing it. And so the USCCB has this new, and the Committee on the Catechism has this new document that it just came out that we talked about last time that looks at, yes, the intellectual is key, but it's that behavior and that internal movement of faith that is important. And then most importantly is that the end goal of all of this is missional, right? It's that someone's comfortable sharing their faith, comfortable speaking about it, witnessing to it. I just had a great conversation with a bunch of diocesan directors last week, and we talked about this because even myself at times, when I'm on a plane, it's probably one of the most uncomfortable times when someone turns to you and says, "Oh, what do you do for work?" Because I know when I'm on that plane, it's probably going to enter into a lengthy conversation. So how do we get people comfortable being those missional witnesses at the end of this?
That's a great start. As I travel around to parishes, I'm increasingly reminded and convinced that when it comes to a great parish, the people make the place. And what I mean by that is we can get caught up in styles of the way things look or curriculum or things like that. But in the end, I remember the people. Remember how I felt when I was with them, how they related to me, how they were kind to me and connected with me. And it seems like even more for this topic that is so important, that the people who are great at teaching didactically, really unpacking a lot of information, knowledgeable, may not be the same people that are great at this style of, as you said, a lived charisma, a relational accompaniment. How important is it to have the right people in place for this new vision?
I think it's critical. I think thankfully the vision doesn't completely rest in our abilities, but rests in our capacity to say yes to what God is asking us. But earlier I was thinking, particularly for those that are listening, and like, what are some of the hows to's that people need to convert for? Because we're not just talking about, how do we help people come to greater understanding of the gospel, but we're talking about how do we help our ministries convert to be more missional, and then how do we as an institution culturally change? So you've got three layers of renewal that are happening at the same time. So I was thinking about a couple of these paradigms. The first one I would say is, in order to have the right people, you need to prioritize the vision of making disciples at your parish. And the best disciples are going to be great catechists, and the best catechists are going to be great disciples. So those two things need to be fused. The third thing I would say is discipleship pathways are not optional. You have to absolutely prioritize pre-evangelization, or in OCIA terms, the pre-catechumenate. And it's creating spaces where people have the opportunity to encounter Christ in natural ways. And the other thing I would say is we have to move from being completely centered on children to placing a family at the center of the structure of the life of the parish, and support from the children flows for that. So I think good disciple making is always going to depend on casting good vision for this and really defining what you mean by what does it mean to have a vision for evangelizing catechesis at this parish, not any other parish, but this parish. And I was out in my garden picking tomatoes this morning, and something came to me. Fruit ripens on the vine differently at different times. So I'm still picking tomatoes off my plants, even though I'm 2 days away from a frost, and some are green and some are ready to go. You have families in different stages of readiness. Take the time with your catechist to really assess where people are at.
Yeah, it's hard. I feel like at times we want to just get them through the motions of things. I was talking to my RCIA team about this last week, is that each of these periods doesn't have like a bookend to it, right? It's really on the individual's journey itself and how the parish is accompanying them, getting them connected to intentional community, getting them connected further into their practice of the faith, better understanding the gospel. That's going to take different time periods for each individual. And so I do think that the church is asking us to be more intentional and more individualized with this accompaniment approach. And why discipleship is so key is that it can't fall on one person. I feel like for so long now, the evangelization mission has fallen on a select few. But what the church has said and preached continuously is that the evangelization is the work of the entirety of the church, right? Every single one of its members, everyone who's baptized is called to evangelize, hand on the faith, be a witness. But I think we need to create greater comfort around what that looks like, right? Because it's not having to know every aspect of their faith or having a doctorate in theology. It's having this, being able to feel comfortable with this, what Jesus has done for you, how you interacted with that good news, how it's inspired you, how it's transformed you, and then just being comfortable to be able to share that with others. And I agree with Julianne when she says that this idea is that we have to migrate to this family-focused idea of formation, where all formation doesn't have to also take place at the church, right? That we can use the means of the parish, of the means of the home, to really infuse this type of formation and make it a lived experience of faith rather than just coming and saying, okay, I'm doing these requirements, I'm going to get my sacraments, right? The sacraments are the source of, especially the Eucharist is the source and summit, but it's a source of summit to give us energy for this journey, right? To go out and evangelize and bring more people into this sheepfold.
Can I pick up on what you just said there, Stephen, just as John is catching a breath here? I feel like one of the things, because I received a couple of comments on this privately and then in emails, there's a lot of either or thinking in the church around this. Like it has to be this way or it's not. I'm hearing stories of people trying lots of unusual and interesting things, and I'm like, please don't throw out everything. But I would say it's strong family formation, but also really good formation for children and adults. So a lot of people say, I have a model where I can do everything at one time. And I would say, I would be nervous about that. I think it's important to really look at your capacity to also form children uniquely, to also form adults uniquely, and ensure that the family is at the center of that. I think it's not an either or in classic Catholic understanding. It's this both and approach. And that's what makes, I think, this paradigm sometimes a little bit difficult to grasp, because we typically see a strong child-centered model with very supplemental adult faith formation. But actually what we're asking for is more focus on the adult with supplemental child-centered catechesis. So I just wanted to emphasize that too.
Yeah, that is so important. And it's something that we can also compartmentalize in the parish as being something that happens in these departments, as opposed to something that starts on Sunday mornings. And so, Julianne, when you mentioned the culture of discipleship, the culture of accompaniment, if you are a deacon or a priest or a pastor watching this, or if you have influence in those people's lives, please encourage them to weave into their homilies this conversation about accompaniment, about what it means to be a disciple, that if you are baptized according to Pope Francis, you are a missionary disciple. So we should be able to stand any Sunday morning in our parish. If we make this understood among our parishioners enough, any Sunday morning we should say, how many of you are Catholic? And they all raise their hands. Then we say, how many of you are missionary disciples? And everyone eagerly raises their hands as well, right? So pastors, priests, deacons, please, in your homilies, if you want people to embrace this when they get to the sacramental prep or to the religious education or catechesis, start it in your homilies so this is not a new idea to them when they come into those spaces. It's already something they're familiar with. Something you also spoke to was people being at different stages in their faith. And right now, many parents who are just completely confused in their faith. Many parents who would identify as disaffiliated, yet they're still sending their kids to these programs. What role does empathy play in being a good catechist? And how can we form empathy in the hearts where our catechists aren't just shrugging their shoulders and rolling their eyes and annoyed at these parents who are less engaged, because these parents are confused and scared themselves? So what role do you see that, and how can we form that in our catechists?
John, this is such a profound insight, I feel like, that we often miss, which is the role of empathy and encouragement. We know the statistics. We know many of the children that we see in our classrooms or in our small groups are going home to spaces and homes where they will never talk about their faith. I feel like catechists are often the most undervalued resource we have for the work of disciple making in our parishes. And so I want to encourage our catechists or catechetical leaders and our diocesan directors who are here. You're on the front lines of reaching our current and our future generations. And so I think it starts with helping catechists understand their vocational call. The call of a catechist is a vocational call from the Lord. And it is a privilege and it is a gift. And when catechists understand the privilege and the gift that they're ministering out of, they naturally see that as a great blessing, and our parishes should honor that. I think the role of being compassionate and empathetic go together. To be compassionate means to suffer with, and then to be empathetic means to identify with that. That is, to me, the foundation of good accompaniment along with listening. And so one of the marks I think of good discipleship-based catechesis is where you can introduce, like I use a methodology of read, reflect, pray, respond. Read something, reflect on it, pray about it, and then what is the response? The children and the adults that you're working with should be talking more than you are at times, many times. Just like when we're in prayer, the Lord should be talking to us more than we are talking to him sometimes, so that listening and empathy go together.
And when you look at scripture, that's how Christ reacts, right? So Christ has this movement within inside, and when you look in the scripture, it uses the Greek word for compassion, right? Like that to suffer with, that movement of his internal being, where he just feels this desire to go and help, right? That the woman at the well, the blind man, he feels this internal desire, just like we have, to connect to that individual before any teaching is shared, right? To just know that person, and to know that person intimately, and to lift them up, right? And to help that person begin to see that they are a created child of God, right? That they have this purpose. And I always find that fascinating, is this idea of, when we are trying to get through the formation and go through all of these different classes and stuff, it can be very easily that those people get lost, right? Because it takes a little bit to pause and to hear that person's story, to know what that person is going through, and to realize that it might need to be tweaked a little bit to make that most effective for their family, for who they are, and to know that you're walking with, right? That you're walking alongside them.
Yeah, as we think about this conversation, or this part of the process, I'm reminded of that scene from Ted Lasso. I put this video on my Facebook page where he quotes, I think it's Walt Whitman, maybe. He says, "Be curious, not judgmental." And I just want to encourage you, leaders and catechists, and as you train catechists and form them, encourage them to be curious about people who have differing views, or people who are maybe critical or skeptical of the church. Encourage them to be curious. Tell me more about that. Tell me more about where that really started in your life. And don't ask those questions in ways where you can just set them up to prove them that they're wrong. Ask them in genuine curiosity. I think that's often how our empathy is formed, is through seeing into people and understanding how they got to where they are today. There's something we talked about in our pre-webinar conversation that I want to share and just invite you both to speak to, kind of as we wrap up this segment of the webinar. And it's this shift in a focus or a mindset, that it seems like the old mindset was believe, behave, belong. And what that means is believe what we tell you to believe, behave the way we tell you to behave, and then you belong. Then you're a part of this community. And that's called a closed set in sociology. There's a newer mindset, which is really an old mindset, kind of like the new vision of belong, believe, become. And I think this is what we see in Jesus with his disciples. He invited them to belong. He said, "Come and follow me." As they walked with him, they began to believe. And they had a lot of questions. They criticized him. They told him he wasn't doing things. "No, you're not going to do that, Jesus. You can't do that." They had some really off ideas. But as he walked with them lovingly, they began to believe and become new people. They began to become the disciples that we know and think of today. Belong, believe, become. Jesus didn't say, "Come and follow me after you sign up for this list of doctrine and agree to it, then you can come and follow me." Could you guys unpack that a little more and kind of give your perspectives on it? Because I know that it can be a hard shift for some people.
I'm jumping right into this because I love when I heard you speak about this, John, because I thought I've heard this so many times and I've seen the research on this so many times, but when you spoke about this, I actually heard it in a different way. And so as I was praying about this, I focused on what was common in those three areas was the word be. And that's what we're trying to teach in and model in our discipleship efforts, which is how to be in relationship with the Lord. And so, yes, knowing about him is important, and learning about him is important and doing things for him in his memory and his name are important. But I think one of our greatest challenges is this encounter piece of helping people to be in conversation with the Lord. And so this be piece, be still and know, is really critical. Being is the key to knowing about God. And so belong, believe, become. If you look at those words, I think good pre-evangelization helps us connect what people are longing for. And putting that right in touch with what God is asking, is calling them to. That's the good news. And then this believe, I think about living, like abundant life, the word live, to come alive. What we're inviting people to is to come alive as a result of hearing the good news, and then to become new creations, to become his disciples, and then to invite others. I think this would be a great discipleship pathway for a parish, to invite people to belong, to belong, to be lived, to have new life, and then to become his disciples. To me, it's a classic pathway that brings people into deeper relationship with Jesus. Today, young people want to belong first before they can understand and come to believe. So I love this conversation. I would really encourage parish staff to have a conversation about this.
Yeah, from my experience, so often we find ourselves that the culture has created us to be on islands, and we are just on our own, right? We're like, we know that we're surrounded by people, we have friendships, we're doing that, but when it comes to vulnerability and intimacy, that island becomes a pretty sort of inward looking thing. And so I think there's such a desire for this idea of belonging in all different age groups. They're looking for community, they're looking for purpose, they're looking for ways to connect on these realities of life that they're looking for. So I find that the church has such a fruitful space to be able to foster these intentional communities and foster that belonging, that trust, that authenticity, to let them know that we are trying to figure this all out together, right? I'm not the only one that has a 4-year-old that wakes up in the middle of the night and is afraid of different things, right? And so trying to find those commonalities and put people in relationship with each other, and then to connect. And I always say this, is that we need to take that belonging that we foster and then build a bridge to the beliefs, right? Like, and really, and just don't come in with assumptions. I feel like we bring in tons of assumptions of like, this is what you should know, or this is what should have been formed in you. But I think those assumptions we have to put to the side and figure out, okay, what's going to be the best way to make this connection to this belief. And I look back again, everything I always just go back to the scriptures, because like they've done this before, we've figured this out before. But these early apostles, they met through these communities in all different places, but they then taught about the gospel in different ways, right? How Paul talked to the Jewish people of the time and then talked to the Greeks was very different. He met them in their lived reality. He connected to them. He helped build trust. Then he built the bridge to the charisma, to the good news. And then from there, then you walk with, and then slowly start to become. But that idea of coming also doesn't ever end, right? It's something that we're always tweaking and molding. And you have this divine creator that is that artist that's continuing to mold us into a better version of who he made us to be. So I find that is a great methodology of how to really walk with people deeper into the faith.
Yeah, Stephen, you mentioned building trust. And I think that's the belong piece, is building trust. There's this old saying, that nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think for millennials, Gen Z, I think that belong litmus test is really saying, can I trust you with my life? You know, Julianne, I know you quote often that art of accompaniment quote about taking off your sandals on the holy ground of another person's life. And I love that it recognizes it is a sacred act for someone to let you into their life. And are we holding that with reverence rather than entitlement? Entitlement says, well, you have to go to this and you have to be a part of it because the church says so. Where when we come at it humbly and we say, I want to earn your trust so that you might hear what I have to share or experience what I've experienced, that you might believe and then become. And the become is at the end, because belief changes behavior. If you want to see sustainable changed behavior, look at where somebody's had a belief change in their life. And suddenly you're not nagging them, you're not guilting them. It's just a natural outflow of who they are. But we've put the behavior and belief kind of in the same value. And that's just behavior modification, really, right? So we're going to need to wrap up this first half. And as we do, I want to just hear from each of you. Do you have anything in closing you'd like to share with these great people who've given us an hour of their time today?
Yeah, there's a question that's coming in, and I don't know if Stephen or John have had a chance to see it, so I'm referencing it because it also came to me directly. How do you suggest, I help train catechists, how do you suggest people that are stuck in the informational model take steps in the evangelizing catechesis model? I think it's really important to cast a vision, a hopeful, joyful vision on this. And I don't think that we can skip over that. We don't know what we don't know. A lot of our catechetical leaders, our priests, our bishops are saying, we don't know what this means. So let's cast a vision for that model to get people excited. I think it's important to incentivize change too, and to say, you know what, you might not know how to do this, but we're going to figure this out together. And you're here because God has called you to be here. But let's take these steps forward and to work with that coalition of the willing to build a new vision, because this vision cannot rest on the catechetical office or the person that's training catechists, but it has to rest amongst the shared experiences of people in the parish. And the last thing I would say is the answer to the question of how do I evangelize people effectively lies in doing the work of evangelization. The Holy Spirit never gives you the whole picture, He gives you the next step. So start by evangelizing together, and you're going to find the answers are going to come. I think we sometimes think the answers come outside of ourselves, but they often come from within the community. So trust, like you're saying, John, trust the wisdom that's there, and trust that the same God that brought you to this place is the same God who called Peter and John and all of the disciples, and just lean into that.
Yeah, Barbara, thank you for asking that question, because this is something we discussed in our pre-webinar conversation that we didn't get to. And along with what Julianne says of casting a vision, I would say modeling it for them as well, because they may be stuck in it because it's all they've ever known. It's all they've ever seen. Nobody's ever accompanied them. And so when we model it, when we spend time investing in their lives, we have dinners with them, we invite them to our home, we share our own experience with them, they begin to see what we're talking about. But if we train our catechists in rows by giving them information and teaching them didactically, and then we go tell them to do something different, there's a real disconnect there. And as I said, a lot of them might even not really understand what we're talking about. The other part of that is, as Julianne said, cast a vision. And Michael asked here, can you give a concrete example of what that might look like? I'll just say, I think vision is often best cast through storytelling. So, because storytelling moves around our understanding of words and what they mean to us. Because if I say, have a lived evangelizing catechesis, what does that mean to people? But if I share a story about a person who we got to know better, who we spent more time with, and we saw God move in their life over a period of time and saw them encounter Christ, that is the best vision casting we can do. Any thoughts from the two of you on vision casting?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so I just started at a new parish. I was working on another one for 3 years. And so what I did here is I provided them with the experience of what I want the families to experience, right? And so we have, for FFLCM, we have a program called Seek. It's Seek for Adults. It's a charismatic experience, but there's tons of them. Like, you have Alpha and Christ Life. There's tons of different ways to have those types of charismatic, and where you are reintroduced and sort of hearing these stories and witnesses of the gospel. I find that the more we can provide them an experience, a very tangible one that's not just like telling them information, but letting them get down into it and try to do something creative, something that's really awakening the senses, I find that is very helpful as well. And so that's what we did here. And I think it really helped pitch the vision a little bit better, because they got the tangible aspect
I couldn't
of
agree
how
with
to
you
do that.
more. Yeah, I
Mhm.
think when we talk about charismatic catechesis, we always go to what's the definition of the charisma? Well, it's, the term used 9 times in the scriptures, and okay, it means to herald or proclaim. Okay, rather than just talk about it and look at the theology of the church and the documents, and those are wonderful. have people experience the kerygma as the kerygma through music, through art. And you can do this. There's lots of different models that are out there. In fact, John, I'll provide to you a little worksheet that I have used in my own catechetical program that helps people choose scriptures or choose music or choose art where they can experience the kerygma as the kerygma. The other thing I would say is if you don't incentivize change, people can often be frustrated because they're like, what's wrong with the way we're doing things? You have to share urgency for this vision. Here's the reality of what we're facing. I find that sometimes we're very caught in our own insular little bubbles and we forget the reality. For example, I read a statistic this morning that said 54% of Gen Z young women are disaffiliating from the church. It's faster than any demographic right now. Okay, this is a crisis point for us. There are many others in the church, but I'm not sure we're always talking about those. Incentivize change positively. This is hopeful. This is what we're called to. This is Jesus's model, but also be real about the fears that people have of, I don't know how to do this differently, because unfortunately we can get frustrated if we don't paint that vision and get people to the other side of it.
Yeah, the same empathy we want our catechists to have with our parishioners, we need to have with our catechists, right? And I love this. Linda just sent us a great reminder. Thank you so much for saying this. She said, storytelling is important, but even more important is story listening. So as we're helping our catechists shift, let's have them share their stories with us about how they came to be catechists and what their experience was. And that is, we can't just tell them what we want them to do. We need to listen to their stories also. Fantastic. So Julianne and Stephen, got to run. Thank you so much. We're going to transition here to our second half with your former coworker, Patty Rodriguez, there in Newark. And Julianne, you're going to be there in a couple weeks with them. So thank you guys again. You're the best. Appreciate you joining us. All right. Before we transition to Patty, let me just ask you, if you enjoy the content that you receive here, if this is helpful to you, I encourage you to check out a few things. One is our website, greatcatholicparishes.org. You can sign up for our newsletter, and that means every time we have one of these, that you'll be the first to get an email about it, to register. Go to our Facebook page and like us. We post content, articles, and also information about things that we're doing. And then lastly, our YouTube channel, which there's a link there too. Subscribe to that. And you don't even have to wait for me to send you the email with the video in it. You'll have access to our YouTube channel. You'll get it as soon as I post it on the YouTube channel. So check that out. All right, Patty, are you there still? Have we kept you on?
Hi, John. I am here. Thank you.
Well, so glad that you're here. And Patty is the director of the Office of Lifelong Faith Formation at the Archdiocese of Newark. Could you not come up with a longer title?
I know. I did want it a little shorter, but every word was critical. It was determined.
That's right. And you've kind of had a little fame recently in renaming your office. I've seen news articles about this all over. And, I began working with your office, was it like 3 years ago? It was pre-pandemic, I think, wrestling with, who are we? How can we best serve our parishes? What does the future look like for faith formation? And you renamed the office. So share with us what the name of your office was, and then what you renamed your office to, and why was that important to you?
Okay. So our office was the catechetical office, just simple, the catechetical office. And as of September, the name, as John said, the nice long name is the Office for Lifelong Faith Formation. And why we decided to take that step is because internally as an office, right, we have a vision, and we've had a vision actually that has slowly been evolving over the years. The catechetical office here in the Archdiocese of Newark has been working with adult faith formation, has been working with family faith formation for some time, more so with adults, and now as family catechetical models continue to emerge, we're looking at what is effective, etc. So it's been happening, but not as much as we would like. It is still hasn't been the center or the primary focus, right? So we might be saying that we want it to be the primary focus, but to translate that into action and what that really looks like is challenging. And that part of that challenge is because our parishes are not yet really focused that way. So as we support our parishes and we provide very practical on the ground support for the daily issues that they encounter in their catechetical sessions, programs, etc., initiatives, they're mostly focused on children. And so then our energies are directed, right, to focusing on the children. And so when we hear catechetical office here, both internally at our pastoral center outside of our office, the other offices that work alongside us, and outward facing towards the parishes, when people hear catechetical office, they're still thinking children, exactly what Julianne and Stephen were talking about, children in classrooms, right? CCD, this is what we hear, right? And so although we've already been moving in this direction towards more lifelong faith formation, I think changing the name, first of all, it's given us a platform to be able to express and explain, it's kind of opened that door for us, the opportunity to really explain what does that even mean, lifelong faith formation, and what does that look like potentially. And so it expresses more accurately what we really aim to do and what we have been doing and what we hope to increase doing to kind of shift that narrative so that, as Julianne said, the child is supported by way of the family, right?
I think language is so important, because things mean different things to different people, especially when you get religious words that have a lot of people's history attached to them. And it can be hard to get people to change words because they are so attached to them. I think we've got to ask ourselves what best serves the average person that's hearing what we're talking about, right? Like when it comes to your parish mission statement, even. By the way, I think you need to do t-shirts for your office that on the back just say "womb to the tomb."
Yeah, that's right.
And that'll be your tagline for your office. But this is a huge shift to change a name. You had to have support from your leadership, but you also had to kind of build a case for this. You had to build a case to say, here's why this is important. Here's the data, because leadership is looking for that in a big change like this. What role did listening and collaboration with your parish leaders play in making this change?
Well, I mean, that was really front and center, and it's really where I would say most of our time has been invested. It's interesting because, we can make plans, like we can make our pastoral plan for the office and set our goals and our objectives, and those things, are very structured and they can be great. But at the same time, sometimes it's frustrating when they move along a little slowly because we're taking time out to address all of the concerns, the issues, the questions that come in from our parish catechetical leaders and our pastors and our priests. But really taking that time to address those concerns and those questions and to really listen to what they are communicating with us in their words, in their attitudes, what they're saying, sometimes what they're not saying, even in their absence, is really the time that has been best spent. Even if the bigger initiatives take a little longer, maybe move at a slower pace, I think in the end, they also will be more effective and they'll be really rooted in something that is a solid foundation, right? That's been built on this trust and on this the relationships that we've cultivated. So that's really what we've spent a lot of time doing over the last, few years in all sorts of ways, in the informal ways, whenever the phone rings and there's a concern, there's an issue, there's something that is on the PCL's mind, in ways where we will actually go ahead and do a formal survey. And that might look all kinds of different ways in which you can survey through meetings, listening sessions, and just, really carefully taking all of that information and pulling it together and looking at the data, looking at the patterns, looking at, what are the most frequent things that are coming up, and also listening to our priests and to our pastors, because if we accompany the parish, we accompany the parish. And the pastors are the leaders of their parish and their primary catechists. And so, really working together with the PCL and the pastor, and even maybe sometimes getting them to listen to one another, has been really the best investment that we've made.
That's great. Something you and I talked about earlier was that this name change just confirmed what you were already doing. I think it's really important. We can't just change a name and think that things are going to be different. we have to really lead with organizational change and the way that we're doing things. And you did that months, even years before changing the name, and the name just confirmed what you're already doing. So there wasn't a disconnect there. Our time with Patty is going to be really short today, but here's why. As we were talking, I realized we have a lot of catechetical leaders on a diocesan level that join us for these webinars. So I'm going to add an extra webinar this next month with Patty just for diocesan leaders. So if you're a diocesan leader, and I know the conversation on a diocesan level has some different challenges and some different things that need to happen, please join us for this. The link is going to go in the chat window there. It'll go out in the email after this. November 13th, Catechesis for diocesan leaders only. Patty's going to be joining us again. It's going to be more of an interactive discussion. I'm hoping to do it in a meeting format where you can all be on here and we can actually talk to each other. So Patty, thank you for doing that. And I'll see you in just a couple weeks.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much for having me, John. Looking forward to it. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Patty. All right, Betsy and Angela, are you there? I think you're there. I want to give us plenty of time to talk about what you guys are doing. Thank you for joining us. You're right down the road. I really should have just driven down and done the whole webinar from your parish.
That's right. We're just in Waco, right up the road.
Well, Stephen recommended you guys because you are doing such a holistic faith formation throughout your parish, and it's collaborative with different offices and different departments and ages and demographics. So just share with us just kind of an overall vision for your model of faith formation.
Yes, well, we've kind of restructured, like you said, restructured our whole way of doing things, beginning with just even how we structure our ministry. We sort of had separate entities in the past of like elementary formation and middle school formation and high school formation. And this year, really, with the support of our priest, he really wanted to see more of this push towards holistic, like family-based and lifelong learning. And so we now have a family ministry that encompasses families that have children of any age, kindergarten through 12th grade. And when they come to formation experiences at the church, we're offering something for everybody within the family. So even like preschool has something, elementary, everybody has an experience. The parents have their experience, and all of the experiences that they participate in when they come are all very aligned with each other and always end with a shared prayer experience related to whatever it is they were learning. And then Angela has done a lot of work to kind of tie how we're trying to serve these families in with ongoing adult faith formation experiences, so that the hope is that they just become excited about learning about their faith within these experiences with their families, and then seek out these other specific adult formation opportunities to even further their own independent faith journey.
Angela, tell us about that, about connecting, because I think what you said is important. You're seeking to have a common thread of what you're saying, but you are crafting it uniquely for the different groups. Talk about that, helping parents and adults that are in this with their kids take a next step to a personal journey of faith.
I mean, nobody wants to go sit in a tiny chair and just hear the adult version of the exact same lesson your kids are getting. Like that doesn't provide the dignity to the parents or adults that their role as the primary catechist of their family kind of demands, you know what I mean? So yeah, I think it's really critical to have actually differentiated content that meets the parents where they are. And then the cool thing has been that it's like, once you say like, hey, we're not gonna silo elementary and high school anymore. It's like the synergy starts building, and the next thing you know, our RCIA or OCIA team is like, hey, what you're doing is actually really good. And, we've got this one family that wants to go through RCIA together. And gosh, if they did pieces of your programming, they wouldn't really need to do our whole program here. And next thing you know, And then you've got the adult faith formation people wanting to get involved. Like they like being small group leaders. They like working with other adults. And we're like, hey, we've got 500 adults right here. Why don't you come serve with these? And they love that because that's what they've been wanting to do all along, is have 500 adults who are wanting to learn more about their faith. And so it's like this ball that starts rolling down the hill and it just starts accumulating. And I've been amazed at the way that like switching to this like lifelong faith formation model has like almost taken on a life of its own, as we realize that we are actually much more effective at helping each other and lightening each other's loads. We're not duplicating efforts anymore. And I think too that people can feel that, like they feel honored and their time respected because they realize, well, I don't have to now go to a duplicate class over here, which are some of the silly hoops that we were kind of having people jump through a few years ago. And people love it. It's just like, I was listening to everyone, listening to the whole webinar, and it's like, for us, when our eyes are open to what's possible, we're like, oh yes, I want more of that. It's the exact, like it's on the micro level, that's what happens to people in our programming. Like their eyes are open to like, oh my gosh, this is possible. I can be the type of person who goes to mass every week and forms my kids in my home. Like, I didn't know that was possible for me. Look at all these other people that are doing it. And they're like, so it's cool that we get to step out in faith the same way that we're asking them to step out in faith. It's just made for some amazing relationships. And it's like easier to be humble when you're kind of in uncharted territory a little bit. And I think that's beautiful and okay.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. That's so beautiful. I think something you said earlier is important to remark. And you talk about people being excited about it and going, wow, this is great. I often hear parishes complain, people come to the sacrament and they never come back. And when I say, tell me about your program, I kind of realize why they don't come back. Why would you want to come back for more of something that is just boring and being talked at? And when something is great, when people experience something that's great, that resonates with their heart, that is useful and helpful to them, they not only want to come back, they tell their friends about it. And as I hear about programs like yours and what Stephen's doing with marriage up in New Jersey, it starts slow, and then people start telling their friends, and then you're kind of overwhelmed because there's so many people. I know you guys are overwhelmed with the people that want to participate in this now. Share with us you do some unique things that are like a low barrier of entry for people who are still skeptical and still like, I don't know if this thing's for me. Tell us about what some of those things are, because I think it's important to remember families are looking for things like this to do. And what if their parish was the place providing them?
Yeah, we really felt like it was important, especially given I'm sure this is the case with a lot of parishes, that our families often have like mixed faith households where one parent might be Catholic and one parent might not be, or one parent might be brand new to the faith because they came into the faith as an adult. And they just have even more insecurity. They're like, well, I'm not the Catholic one. I can't come to step there. I can't do that. Or what if someone's going to ask me a Catholic question and I don't know the answer? So last year we really started these what we call like entry level experiences. And this was sort of born of the discipleship pathway work that our priest also just really was passionate about bringing to our parish, and understanding that there's so many people in our church that are at the very, very beginning of their discipleship journey. And that stage in discipleship really is just about positive connections and positive associations and relationships, and has very little to do with actual like catechesis or learning about the faith. It's like feeling comfortable and feeling cared about. And so we created these opportunities, like we have a father, it's all like these different parent-child opportunities for the parents and children to bond together in like fun environments, but also to meet other people. Like we do a father-son Nerf war in our gym. We had a mother-daughter pajama party that was really fun, with just like an ice cream bar and games and bingo. Oh yeah, and that was a whole separate one. We had a family bingo night. We did a father-daughter dance, and that was a huge hit, just really, really fun, and brought in like a dance instructor to teach different dances and stuff to the dads was really great. And then a mother-son minute to win it game competition thing. So all of that, and then just mixed in with a lot of, like this past week, we had a family adoration experience that was like, yes, it was adoration, but for people who had never been to adoration, it was almost like a teaching or learning adoration. Like Angela was at the front guiding it and would give just little tiny snippets of like, and now this is what's happening. And this is how you can choose to, pray or sit or stand or whatever. And now the priest is going to do this. And it means this when he does it, so people, we wanted them to feel comfortable being in there if they had never, ever, ever been to adoration before, and didn't want them to feel like they wouldn't know what to do or what to say or would look like they were doing the wrong thing. And then last year too, we offered these, we called them just family faith formation classes, where it was a class in between the morning masses that was a family-based class. And last year, all the classes were about Eucharistic miracles. And then all of those families sat together and had a reserved section at Mass. And after Mass, we had a big potluck lunch with kids playing outside on the playground and just things like that. So lots of opportunities for just people to be friends, to learn someone's name, to connect with someone else, to have, a positive association with the community. And so that has been, I feel like, really, really successful in helping people feel like they have friends and have community here.
Those all sound like belong opportunities. When we talk about this model,
Yeah.
belong, believe, become, they're opportunities where people can begin to feel like they belong, even though they're not sure what to do and they don't know the answers to the questions. And I think about a father-daughter dance. That's something that someone could invite their neighbor to bring their kids to. And they're just looking for something wholesome to do with their children. They don't care that it's at a Catholic church, but they
Right.
might begin to belong as they meet other parents and families there. All of this stuff sounds amazing. It sounds great. And I know you have a big parish, but it sounds like it takes a lot of people to make all this happen, which is the reality of this new vision. Really, is that it's labor intensive. To just be frank, it takes a lot of people to have relational ministry. Now, I asked you where you get these people and how you get them. And when you were sharing your answer, I wanted to jump up on my chair and cheer, because this is what I tell parishes over and over and over again. But so few really fully embrace it, and they just keep asking for volunteers from the pulpit, from the bulletin, and they wonder why they don't get more great people serving. Where do you get all these volunteers? Yeah. Angela, why don't you tell us, what's your secret?
It's so sad because we have been those people, and every once in a while we have to help each other, because we do tend to get salty about like, why didn't anyone respond to the link that we posted on the website? But we just can't be that way, because we know that the way it works is just by calling them up and talking to them, telling them why we called them, why we thought of them. And sometimes the answer is as simple as, we prayed about it and your name came. And sometimes we actually do that. We go to monthly staff adoration with a piece of paper and we say, like, God, who do you want us to invite to be a part of this? And we just start writing down names, and then we all come back together and we just literally call those people. And sometimes it's personal invitation, and sometimes it does take a long time, but the response has been overwhelming. Like, people are happy to step up, and they're fabulous, and they're willing to do new things. But yes, I think it you have to invest the time, and you have to kind of, like you were talking about, vision casting for that person. Like, this is our vision of what we see that you could bring to this ministry, and will you step out and join us? And yeah, people are willing. It's just that it takes a lot of time to personally invite them. So
yeah, the statistics are that about 7% of the people will respond to a pulpit announcement or a bulletin announcement. And half of those people you do not want serving in the role that you are inviting people to serve in. 70% of the people will say yes to a meaningful invitation from a friend who shares why they see that person as a great fit for this ministry. Betsy, you were saying that you just sometimes flip through the like the parish directory, right? And prayerfully say, God, who would you have for this that I haven't thought of before?
Yes, that is. And Angela's been really helpful and supportive to me in that as well. And I've learned to, it's like that thing of like, the people's faces and that they are kind and you watch them and you see them and know like who they are. And then as I'm looking, yes, I was like, we need a lot of people, God. Who do you want me to ask? I will do it. I will ask them. And truly was just flipping through the directory and like, okay, that person. Yes. Okay. I'm going to look up their phone number right now and call them. And so that is how we got a lot of we call them our accompaniment teams for our different programming and stuff that we're doing. And it's been really great. They've had a really positive response to it. They've shared with us even after the classes that they're so excited to be a part of it. And it's truly made our programming an entire parish-wide initiative. Like we have people over all the generations serving in different ways. And it really feels like it's like God's work and not mine because they're not all my personal friends. They're not all the people that I see in my social circles, but it's who God wants to do these different things. And I feel like it's really important for them to realize too that yes, their name was like God brought them to us and maybe he had a perfect plan for that person to be in front of their small group for a specific reason that I don't know. And only God knows that they were supposed to minister to this tween or this teen or this preschool student or whatever it may be. That trusting God's call over that and being faithful to what he's asking us to do. It's cool to see that all these people and all their interactions are opportunities for just divine connections that we might not fully understand.
And your circle of people that and Angela's circle of people that she knows is limited.
Mm-hmm.
But when you train your volunteers to have an invitation mindset, and you train them in how to say, hey, remember how I invited you? I'm going to now commission you to go invite others. Then you get a multiplication effect and you get a culture of invitation, right? And then we really want for nothing, because you think about if every volunteer is led in that, and let's say we go by those statistics, and each of them, if you say, hey, leading up to this new season, I want you to prayerfully invite 3 people to serve with you. If just one of those people says yes, you just doubled your volunteer numbers, right? So it really works. Encourage everyone listening, personal invitation, do it. It's so much better. And the people you get are they're a better fit. They're more committed. They feel accompanied in it. I know we're running late, but I want to ask you one last question here. You talked about having a unity of mission, or a unity of discussion across different age groups in the topics that you're talking about. And you shared with me a way that you kind of bring all those leaders together to identify what that's going to be and how we're going to do that. Share about how you create this unity of vision across the different areas of faith formation.
I can't stress enough how amazing it's been to have a pastor who's just bold and courageous and has really worked hard to create a culture of collaboration in the parish. Because I mean, truly what happened organically in our case is that we started having so many people who were involved in adult faith formation, and we're pulling them over to minister to parents, to accompany parents. And those people are friends and ministering with the adult faith formation people. And finally, we just called a meeting. And we just said, hey, let's all sit down around one table. Let's all talk about what we're doing. And, because we have of course, like everybody, we have most staff members surrounding the kids piece. We already had a plan laid out for the year for the kids, but now realizing that their parents are also an integral component of what we're doing, the adult faith formation people just like stepped right up. That we're like, okay, we're going to be providing this charismatic retreat experience. And then we're going to move into like creedal catechesis for the bulk of our families. And they just immediately stepped up and they were just like, okay, great. Like, let's have some further study classes about like, discovering the biblical roots of the Mass. That'll fit in perfectly with what you're doing over here. And it's great because, you talk about the pathway, of course, we do have some people who are ready to go deeper. And so if they want more, they can spin off into these other opportunities that are maybe a little more informational, but they're still kind of swimming in the same water that they're swimming in with their kids in faith formation for their family. And so again, it was the adult faith formation people. Okay, well then we'll offer this class. And then it was like, okay, well, let's make sure that the confirmation retreat experience kind of leans into this same stream, and hey, we're going to offer prayer experiences, of course, right? You're going to have something for Advent, you're going to have something for Lent. Let's make sure they meaningfully connect. And we just started aligning everything. And it's fabulous because the adult faith formation people, they have greater participation. Like they're doing Bishop Barron's, but I think it's Ascension, Biblical Walk Through the Mass. They have higher registration numbers than they've ever had before because they're taking advantage of the synergy with what we've got going on. They don't have to really advertise or like convince people why they should do this because we're doing that for them over here. And it's like, it's just elevated everything. And it's been a huge blessing.
I love hearing about parish departments collaborating together, recognizing we have one mission. Let's really create a synergy around what we're all doing together. That is beautiful. Betsy, any final thoughts on that collaboration piece?
No, I mean, a lot of it too is just for us finding resources that we feel like really lend to this. And, as far as like when we meet for the family faith formation stuff and classes, the Pathways program is what our parish is using. And it already like does that kind of hard work for us. Like it has the class for parents, it has the class for teenagers, it has the class for kids. And we've tweaked some things to even provide different classes for different age groups, even younger, and then some like tween stuff. So having really great content has been really helpful because it really lays the foundation for us so we can focus on, yes, our teams and what our mission is and not having to reinvent the wheel to make things up.
That's great. I'm so encouraged. I would say over the last year, I have just continually been more and more encouraged at the things I see happening in the church around the country, especially in this area of family faith formation. But, the statistics and the news will tell us doom and gloom. The ship is going down. The church is dying. But I feel like in the next 10 years, we are going to see the fruit of what's happening today. And I'm just excited. I'm grateful to get to see the bright spots around the country where this is happening. And you certainly are one of those. And I will be coming down there soon. I want us to get a cup of coffee at Common Grounds and talk more. And I want to see your parish. So thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. It's been a great time, and I hope to see you again soon. God bless.